at the side of the least among us. Christian holiness often flourishes in the most forgotten and wounded places of humanity. The poorest of the poor, those who lack not only material goods, but also a voice and the recognition of their dignity, have a special place in God's heart. They are the beloved of the gospel, the heirs to the kingdom. It is in them that Christ continues to suffer and rise again. It is in them that the Church rediscovers her call to show her most authentic self. St. Teresa of Calcutta, canonized in 2016, has become a universal icon of charity lived to the fullest extent in favor of the most destitute, those discarded by society. Foundress of the Missionaries of Charity, she dedicated her life to the dying abandoned on the streets of India. She gathered the rejected, washed their wounds, and accompanied them to the moment of death with the tenderness of prayer. Her love for the poorest of the poor meant that she did not only take care of their material needs, but also proclaimed the good news of the gospel to them. We are wanting to proclaim the good news to the poor that God loves them, that we love them, that they are somebody to us, that they too have been created by the same loving hand of God to love and be loved. Our poor people are great people. They are very lovable people. They do not need our pity and sympathy. They need our understanding love. They need our respect. They need that we treat them with dignity. All this came from a deep spirituality that saw service to the poorest as the fruit of prayer and love, the source of true peace, as Pope John Paul II reminded the pilgrims who came to Rome for her beatification. Where did Mother Teresa find the strength to place herself completely at the service of others? She found it in prayer, and in the silent contemplation of Jesus Christ, his holy face, his sacred heart. She herself said as much. The fruit of silence is prayer. The fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is love. The fruit of love is service. It was prayer that filled her heart with Christ's own peace and enabled her to radiate that peace to others. Teresa did not consider herself a philanthropist or an activist, but a bride of Christ crucified, serving with total love her suffering brothers and sisters. In Brazil, Saint Dulce of the Poor, known as the Good Angel of Bahia, embodied the same evangelical spirit with Brazilian characteristics. Referring to her and two other religious women canonized during the same celebration, Pope Francis recalled their love for the most marginalized members of society and said that the new saints show us that the consecrated life is a journey of love at the existential peripheries of the world. Sister Dulce responded to precariousness with creativity, obstacles with tenderness, and need with unshakable faith. She began by taking in the sick in a chicken coop, and from there founded one of the largest social services in the country. She assisted thousands of people a day without ever losing her gentleness, making herself poor with the poor for the love of the poorest one. She lived with little, prayed fervently, and served with joy. Her faith did not distance herself from the world, but drew her ever more deeply into the pain of the least among us. We could also mention individuals such as St. Benedict Many and the Sisters Hospitaliers of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, who worked alongside people with disabilities. St. Charles de Foucauld among the communities of the Sahara. St. Catherine Drexel, the most underprivileged groups in North America. Sister Emmanuel with the garbage collectors in the Azbet el Nakal neighborhood of Cairo, and many others. Each in their own way discovered that the poorest are not objects of our compassion, but teachers of the gospel. It is not a question of bringing them to God, but of encountering Him among them. All these examples teach us that serving the poor is not a gesture to be made from above, but an encounter between equals, where Christ is revealed and adored. St. John Paul II reminded us that there is a special presence of Christ in the poor, and that this requires the Church to make a preferential option for them. Therefore, when the Church bends down to care for the poor, she assumes her highest posture. Popular movements. We must also recognize that throughout centuries of Christian history, helping the poor and advocating for their rights has not only involved individuals, families, institutions, or religious communities. There have been, and still are, various popular movements made up of lay people and led by popular leaders who have often been viewed with suspicion and even persecuted. I'm referring to all those persons who journey, not as individuals, but as a closely bound community of all and for all, one that refuses to leave the poor and the vulnerable behind. Popular leaders, then, are those able to involve everyone. They do not shun or fear those young people who have experienced hurt or borne the weight of the cross. These popular leaders know that solidarity also means fighting against the structural causes of poverty and inequality, in the lack of work, land, and housing, and of the denial of social and labor rights. It means confronting the destructive effects of the empire of money. Solidarity, understood in its deepest sense, is a way of making history, and this is what the popular movements are doing. For this reason, when different institutions think about the needs of the poor, it is necessary to include popular movements and invigorate local, national, international governing structures with that torrent of moral energy that springs from including the excluded in the building of a common destiny. Popular movements, in fact, invite us to overcome the idea of social policies being a policy for the poor, but never with the poor and never of the poor, much less part of a project which can bring people back together. If politicians and professionals do not listen to them, democracy atrophies, turning into a slogan, a formality. It loses its representative character, it becomes disembodied, since it leaves out the people in their daily struggle for dignity and the building of their future. The same must be said of the institutions of the Church. Chapter 4. The History That Continues. The Century of the Church's Social Doctrine. The acceleration of technological and social change in the past 2 centuries, with all its contradictions and conflicts, not only had an impact on the lives of the poor, but also became the object of debate and reflection on their part. The various movements of workers, women, and young people, and the fight against racial discrimination gave rise to a new appreciation of the dignity of those on the margins of society. The Church's social doctrine also emerged from this matrix. Its analysis of Christian revelation in the context of modern social, labor, economic, and cultural issues would not have been possible without the contribution of the laity, men and women alike, who grappled with the great issues of their time. At their side were those men and women religious who embodied a church forging ahead in new directions. The epochal change we are now undergoing makes even more necessary a constant interaction between the faithful and the Church's magisterium, between ordinary citizens and experts, between individuals and institutions. Here, too, it needs to be acknowledged once more that reality is best viewed from the sidelines, and that the poor are possessed of unique insights indispensable to the Church and to humanity as a whole. The Church's magisterium in the past 150 years is a veritable treasury of significant teachings concerning the poor. The bishops of Rome have given voice to new insights refined through a process of ecclesial discernment. By way of example, in his encyclical letter, Rerum Novarum, Leo XIII addressed the labor question, pointing to the intolerable living conditions of many industrial workers and arguing for the establishment of a just social order. Other popes also spoke on this theme. St. John XXIII, in his encyclical Mater et Magistra, 1961, called for justice on a global scale. Rich countries could no longer remain indifferent to countries suffering from hunger and extreme poverty. Instead, they were called upon to assist them generously with all their goods.